Today's video will be covering a fan favorite movie and will be filled with spoilers if you've never seen the movie. I'm not sure why you'd be watching this otherwise, but just in case, spoilers ahead! We'll be looking at how I made my Return of the Joker, Future Joker, and Flashback Little JJ. Have a seat and follow along. We'll start with the Joker because he's about half done already since I made him years ago, but I'm revising his look. I originally made him based off of the model sheet I found, but realized later that he's way too big compared to how he was actually drawn in the movie. My original recipe consisted of using a Firefly torso since Joker is traditionally drawn with wide shoulders, and TNBA Scarecrow legs because they were thin and tall. His hands were also from that Scarecrow, and I cut them and glued them into his cuffs so that they stuck out just enough, like so. Then for his head, the natural choice was TNBA Joker with shaved down and resculpted hair and painted details. My revised recipe is to thin his body down quite a bit by using the TNBA Joker torso and shoulders, and then grab the Batman Who Laughs Joker legs because those are also nice and thin. They make a great combo because Joker's torso is very short and the legs I chose are super tall. Together they make him the right height and a much more accurate build. Okay, let's start on his modifications. I mentioned what shoulders I'll use, but I'm keeping my original Firefly forearms since the Scarecrow hands are glued in. You could probably still use the TNBA Joker forearms and thicken them up a little if needed though. First thing to change on the torso is to heat it up and remove the bow tie and flower. Next, spin up the Dremel and shave down his lapels and collar. Switch to your disc Dremel and cut off his coat tails on the front and the back. For the legs, Dremel down his calves a little and blend it to look natural. I already have his head mainly done, but use the disc Dremel to cut the main points off of his hair, and then switch to your standard Dremel to round out his head. Okay, that should be it for dremeling, so now we can break out the epoxy sculpt. After any cleanup with scraping, sanding, or dremeling, mix up a little epoxy and put some down for his slicked back hair. I originally made mine too thick, so I'm dremeling it down to look better here. After the head, move down to his torso to start filling in the gaps from where we removed his bow tie and flower, and then build up the shirt area between his open jacket. Come down to his legs and fill in the line where the tops of his boots end to erase it and make him look like he has full pant legs instead. After the torso is cured, add some more around his neck to make his low turtleneck. Lastly, I noticed the Joker's waist pieces won't line up quite right, so I'll thicken the rubber diaper piece and smear it down. Once that cures, Dremel it down if needed and you should be good. I think that wraps up his modifications, so we can start painting him. This version of the Joker is a pretty simple and sleek design, so he only has a few colors needed. Black for his hair and main bodysuit, a purple for cell shading that suit, green for cell shading his hair, and then a light blue for his skin, and red for his eyes and cell shaded lip. He'll also need some black for details on his face and hands. When applying cell shading, even though you might think of it as a color on top, it's best to apply it first and then let your top color form the shape. It's far easier to paint black on another color than the reverse of that, as well as it being easier to block your shapes out and only a coat or two with the black. Be sure you're painting it in thin coats each time, and that's really it for him. Well, that's almost it. I needed to add a little hot glue to his waist peg so it would fit properly, and then I wanted to add some neck details. There we go, all set. I'm sure you're wondering about me making the flashback version of Joker from this movie, but I'm a little undecided right now, because I'll be making Justice League Joker and those two designs are very similar. For now, I did make his creation from that flashback sequence, so let's look at the recipe for Joker Jr. I had a couple ideas in mind for this figure and settled on the version that may require more work because at the time the parts were cheaper. I think you could make him from either a full Tim Drake with potentially a creeper head, or what I ended up doing, a full Clarion with a Tim Drake head. I chose Clarion because JJ has the same shoes and I figured I could use his long coat to my advantage in making the traditional looking Joker coat. I thought about Creeper's head because of that huge smile, but it turned out that it wouldn't be too different to use Tim because I wanted that slightly open mouth look for his smile instead. Either one would require dremeling in the mouth and then sculpting the teeth, so I figured why not use Tim's head since it's the right size and shape already. I swapped Clarion's hands for BTAS Riddler's because Clarion has unnecessarily tiny hands for some reason. Alright, let's cook up his changes. I'll start by popping Clarion apart and slimming down his pants to get down to Tim's little stick-like legs. Next, I'll use my disc Dremel to cut an approximate shape for the coattails. Then keep that disc on to cut his hair spikes off. Switch to the regular Dremel bit and smooth the hair out and down. Then Dremel the mask lines off and clean any of that up with some light sanding or dremeling. Time to sculpt. I'll start my epoxy down at Tim's shorts. Mix and roll some up, push it down around above his knee, and then smear the top end to get a nice transition. You'll probably make it a little too thick, but it's always better to Dremel it down than make it too thin to begin with. I'll sketch out my thoughts for the rest of him, starting with a white paint pen for his socks and jacket lines, and then a black one to see how his face will look on Tim's. Yeah, I think that could work out really well if I can figure out how to reproduce his mouth correctly. Mix up some more epoxy the next day and wrap it around his neck for a pseudo collar and then down his torso to fill Clarion's seam line in. You can also make his jacket cuffs at his wrists if you have any of that epoxy left. Roll it, wrap around, but then even out the edges with your knife or other flat tool since you won't be blending this one in. As with the shorts, the cuffs may be too thick, but we'll Dremel on low to get them looking right later. Up on his head, I need to Dremel inside his mouth on the sides where his teeth aren't. Luckily, I have this broken disc Dremel bit that is now just a very tiny piece to use and it works pretty perfectly. Then Dremel the front where the teeth are to start to give some more depth. Enhance that depth with some very thin epoxy for his lip, tracing the shapes you sketched. As with before, you can Dremel them down thinner if needed. I also added a little bit of epoxy on his cheeks to accentuate his smile lines. I don't think I'll sculpt any more on the face and just let the line work do the rest of the heavy lifting. For his hair though, I'll need to shape the hairline as well as the top of the head correctly with some more epoxy there, with the final bit going to his little hair curl hanging down on the right. Okay, back down to his main body. I'll add a tiny roll on either leg for the top of his socks and then smear it down to blend. For his jacket, I'll add some epoxy to give the look of the open jacket with lapels, but then switch to green stuff for the bottom portion to clean up my cuts. You see, I cut too far on my guest, so I had to fill the waistcoat back in so his waist didn't look so thin. Using green stuff here will stay a little flexible and smear in better for the blend. As with all blending, use small amounts of water to really loosen up the sculpting compound and smear it in well. Alright, the last little details needed are to grab those flower and bow tie pieces you removed from the TNBA Joker earlier and give them to Tim. The bow tie will be wonderfully too big for him, but that's how they drew him. In fact, if you want to make it a little bigger, mix up some more green stuff and add it on there. Once it cures, get your disc Dremel back out and get those angles nice and sharp on that bow tie. Switch over to your standard bit on low and polish any transition points down before final sanding and then painting. JJ will need more colors than you might think, even though he's a little figure that wears primarily purple and green. And looking at his pictures, I count 9 total colors. I'll start by priming him with dull coat and then get his base skin color white going. I'm using this extremely light blue since that's kind of where DC Collectibles went with their original Joker skin color. Next, I'll use this purple to get his socks and gloves. Then this light blue-gray will be for his shoe buckles. Next up will be his bright green undershirt and flower. Now for his main purple color. You'll notice I'm painting the colors up in the layers that they're stacked on, skin, undergarments, and so on. Now we can do his green cell shading in the hair, followed by the black to shape it properly and black on his shoes. Red pupils and black lips with the red shine and red inner mouth. Light yellow teeth and eyes, and lastly his facial details with this paint pen. That's all for Tim. I think he turned out really great. Honestly, this part of the show is so disturbing that I really don't like what they did to Robin, but at the same time it makes for a really great story. Speaking of telling that story, he has to have that orange and black gun, right? This one seemed pretty simple and straightforward until I noticed a better option. I bought a couple of the orange carded Adventures Continue Jokers, so I have an extra of his bang flag gun that I can use. I was going to just sculpt over the main body and barrel with a much bigger cylinder while leaving the flag to stick out, but saw a very similar body style in one of my many bullhorns from Commissioner Gordon. I cut the front off of that and added some more to it with epoxy. Cut the back of a pushpin off and that's looking pretty close. Paint it black and orange and there we go. Here are the two sides of the same coin together. I also just posted this photo today over on my Instagram in my final shot for this year's long Halloween series. Thanks to Batman the Articulated series for putting it together again this year. Check out his incredible photography if you haven't seen it before. I do what I can and have some fun when I do it, but I'm nowhere near his talent. A lot of my time goes into making the figures and shooting is just a little bonus. Okay, that wraps up today's video. Thanks for watching. Drop a like if you enjoyed it and subscribe for more monthly content like this and occasional shorts featuring tips or additional customs. Follow me on Instagram if you want to see more customs like these and all of my latest work. After you scroll through my Instagram, come back and leave any requests for characters you see that I haven't made a how-to video of yet. Join me next time as we honor the 20th anniversary of Justice League Unlimited Season 3 this year by looking at how I made my Gorilla Grodd as well as Lex in both his olive green and purple jumpsuits. Grodd's transformation was quite a crazy one, so you won't want to miss it. Check out the rest of my catalog of videos while you impatiently wait for that next one. Have a good one, and happy customizing!